Yo, what is good, everybody? It is your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me, and I am back. I am back with part 2 of What If Deku had Toji's heavenly restriction. Seems like y'all enjoyed the first part. Probably the highest growing video I've had in this format in a very long time. So I feel like I say this all the time. I appreciate all the support that you guys give to the channel, to me, and stuff like that. It just makes me want to do more content for you guys, especially if you guys show a ton of love and a ton of suggestions and stuff like that. Now, with that said, I don't really want to waste too much time because there's a lot to get into and there's a lot to talk about in this Deku What If. So let's get right into where we left off. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya is at home and he finally receives his letter. And that letter is from UA High School. But more specifically, it's from the one and only All Might. Yeah, All Might has officially joined UA High School as a teacher and is currently speaking with Izuku Midoriya about how he broke and shattered the records on the UA entrance exam. And immediately he tells the kid that he is extremely impressed. Extremely. And everything that he was able to do, it was just all because of him. Not All Might himself, but all because of Deku, of course. And he says that he is super impressed and that he can't wait to work with him further, especially because he has so much potential as a hero and frankly might even have the potential to be a greater hero than even himself. And he makes that extremely clear, and he immediately tells Izuku that he should be happy and ready to take on this whole entirety of UA High School. Izuku is extremely excited, especially after All Might tells him that he got number 1. Yes, number 1 in the UA entrance exam, and it wasn't even close. And he would be entering the new year as the number 1 student, and he would be the number 1 student of Class 1A. So Izuku, after some time and also training, studying, and stuff like that, he would approach UA High School with one thing in mind. And that one thing is to be the absolute best at absolutely everything. Now, Izuku physically is going to outmatch everybody, but he can't rely just on that, and he understands that. He knows he can't just rely on that, but he has to rely on his smarts as well. He's studied, he's drilled these things, he's thought about these things, he's thought about a multitude of things to make sure that he's always on top of everything. And he has no doubt in his mind that he can truly be the best, even with someone like Bakugo breathing down his neck. Now, with that said, we start the school year off with the very beginning, and this is something that Izuku is a little bit off-putted by because the door of the Class 1A is so large. He begins to think that there must be absolute giants and absolute insane beings here if that's the case. He would walk in, sit down, and soon he would see people that range from different colors, different body, kind of like body shapes, some huge, some with multiple arms, some pink, some straight up invisible. I mean, this is absolutely insane, but I guess it does make sense. At least that's what he's thinking momentarily. He sits down and awaits for the teacher to arrive, but everyone continues to talk and talk and talk, and eventually Shota Aizawa would be laying on the ground telling them all to shut their mouths, saying that the school year has officially started and that he wants to see exactly what they're capable of. He stands to his feet, completely covered in a sleeping bag of some sorts, and he begins to tell them that he wants to do a bit of a quirk assessment test. Everybody begins to question why they're doing a quirk assessment test when they're supposed to be doing orientation. But Aizawa shuts them up, saying that there is no orientation, at least not right now, and not for them. Because he's allowed to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, as long as it benefits them in the long run. And he tells them all to meet him outside ASAP and to get ready because there's gonna be some stakes involved in all of this. So everybody would head outside and meet on a field nearby. Shota Aizawa, or Racerhead, their teacher, would begin to tell everybody that they have quite a bit to talk about and quite a bit to do, but they're going to start with something simple. He wants them to throw this ball. Yeah, throw this ball. And he wants them to throw it as far as possible. Everybody's a bit confused, but at the same time, it seems exciting in a way. So the first person up would actually be Izuku in this spot. Now, Aizawa would tell him that since he is the #1 person in the entrance exam and the #1 person in Class 1A, he needs to prove himself. He wants to see what he's truly capable of and wants to see if he's really worth all the hype, or is he just going to crumble like some of the wannabe up-and-comers and wannabe All Mights that come through the ranks all the time. Now, Aizawa is kind of BSing here. He knows that not a lot of people come through and are deemed as All Mights next up, or the next person that's going to be that next level or next to All Mights, but he wants to see what the kid is capable of. And he would soon realize that this kid is the real deal when he would launch the ball extremely far. And when I mean extremely far, I mean extremely far. Arguably launching it somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 meters because of just his raw strength and also his understanding of how his strength works. Of course, normally in the canon of this timeline, Izuku launches it with one finger with 100% of his quote-unquote power. But this time around, he's able to utilize his entire body, his entire arm, and also his just entire movement to make sure that he can launch the ball as far as possible, and an accumulation of strength allows him to just bomb the ball extremely far, shocking everybody, thinking that, wow, that is something that nobody has been able to really do in a long time. And also the fact that everyone's kind of excited to try and sort of match up. Now, sort of match up is definitely a loose thing to say because they're not going to be able to necessarily go 1-for-1 with Izuku. I mean, not even close. Izuku is an absolute powerhouse, an absolute freak of nature, but they're still going to try. Or at least that's what they want to do. They want to try. So they're going to try to stack up with Izuku, at least try to keep up somewhat. And some of the girls there actually say like, oh, it's going to be fun to do this. And immediately Aizawa hears this and shuts it all down, saying that if they think it's going to be fun, he's going to make it not fun. And by doing so, he's going to actually put stakes on this, saying that the person in last place is going to get shipped off, sent off, and immediately get expelled from UA. These stakes would make a lot of the people or a lot of students extremely concerned, but Izuku is not concerned, not one bit. He's been training for this. He's been working hard, working with All Might, working on his own, training his entire life. He's been working with different weapons, with different martial arts. I mean, this is part of his life. Competition is part of his life, and it's been something that is a cornerstone for him for a very long time, and makes it so that he's gotten such a head start on everybody. While everybody was just twiddling their thumbs, being happy they have a powerful or semi-strong Quirk, he was out there trying to make himself better, to approach life differently than everyone else, and him doing so has made a massive difference, especially because he begins to #1 score in almost every single category, even putting on a clinic with how fast he can run, going against someone like Tenya Ida and even outclassing him in speed. And that's not even what he's made to do, but that's how fast he truly is. His raw strength with his grip strength, his flexibility, all of it is top notch and at the very height of everything. The only thing he doesn't win is, ironically enough, the ball throw. He loses the ball throw to Ochako, who literally floats the thing into space, which he finds extremely impressive. But overall, he's not too mad that he lost only one category, and he comes out as the very #1 top student. And the person at the very bottom is actually the person that is fully invisible by the name of Hagakure. Now, Izuku does have some things in mind, believing that it doesn't make sense to put her through a situation like this one, because her strengths are going to be nothing even close to what they're actually dealing with in this, type of Quirk assessment. Her strengths would be like, stealth missions, or trying to surprise people in the feat of combat, maybe even saving people out of certain ways without anybody noticing. And Izuku would actually bring this up briefly, as she is deemed as the person that's going to be expelled, And Aizawa would smirk as he's talking about this, as Izuku is bringing it up, because Aizawa never thought that someone would actually bring something like this up. And even Momo Yagurozu would chime in and agree and even add some points of her own, and Aizawa would kind of nod and say that all of them could go to orientation now, and that nobody was getting expelled in the first place anyways. It was just a fear tactic. He laughs it off, or kind of does his little laugh, and everybody leaves to orientation to cap off the rest of the day. But the rest of the class definitely starts thinking, was she actually going to get expelled if they didn't bring those things up? And it seems like the more elaborate things truly impress Aizawa, so they'll have to keep that in mind, especially when hero work is a very elaborate thing, and they can't think of things so one-dimensionally. Now, he would continue kind of his training from day to day, and eventually they would finally get a chance to do actual hero training with the one and only All Might. But this is kind of the same circumstance of this hero training doesn't really fit super well with a lot of the people that are currently there. This is one where if you are on the stronger side or have abilities that make things a lot easier in this situation, it makes it so much easier for you, and you specifically. It's kind of like how every training session or every training kind of difference is going to be massively different depending on if it's 1-on-1, 2-on-1, if you're trying to capture a bomb or anything like that. But Izuku would go with All Might and everybody else to this heroes versus villains training, and he would be grouped up with Ochako Uraraka. Now, Izuku would immediately say that he's going to have to deal with Bakugo because they're going to be facing Bakugo and Tenya Ida. Bakugo has a massive grudge against him and actually hates him to a large degree, so he's going to have to try and spar or fight him initially. He tells Ochako to try and locate the area that Tenya will have the bomb because he guarantees that Bakugo will come running after him and try to hurt him, in which she says that she'll do just that, but how is he so sure? And immediately Izuku says that she'll realize very quickly once the timer is over. And the timer of 5 minutes would eventually chime up, and they would walk in, and you could hear the explosions racing down the staircase. He would kind of nudge her away, saying to go and try to find the bomb already, and she would nod as she runs off. Bakugo would come barreling down and would immediately try to shoot an explosion at Izuku, but Izuku would duck under, grab his arm, and slam him right on his back. And he has to kind of hold back here, because if he slams him too hard, he could straight up fracture and destroy Bakugo's spine or back and stuff like that. It's an absolute scary thing, but he's at the end of the day extremely strong and powerful, so he needs to make sure he doesn't exactly cripple the guy forever. He does beat on Bakugo, knocking him out eventually, but it's obvious who has the upper hand and who, in a technical sense, is just flat out the better fighter. And let's be honest, I mean, there's no shame in that. I mean, there's going to be people that outclass you in specific realms, but this one-on-one fight was not the smartest idea for Bakugo, and I think we can all agree that Bakugo is quickly realizing that Izuku is levels above him, and that what he saw with the sludge villain and everything that happened that day is just cementing that to the largest degree. Izuku would then race upstairs and eventually find where Ochako is, and Tenya Ida would be trying to keep the bomb away from them both. But it's obvious that Izuku has the speed advantage, so he would cover that ground, tapping the bomb and easily defeating them. He would tell Tenya that he's lucky that he didn't have to, or that he didn't want to fight necessarily, just trying to keep the bomb at a safe distance. And he says that his buddy or teammate Bakugo would definitely agree with the fact that they should stray away with taking a frontal assault. In which Tenya says that he didn't want to frontal assault in the first place. Bakugo kind of just ran off and did his own thing, in which Izuku nods his head and says that it sounds like Bakugo. All Might would come on the speakers and would say that it is now over, and that Izuku and also Ochako Uraraka have now won. And frankly, when they get back, there's not much to critique there. Izuku understood, knew the people that were involved, understood what they needed to do. They were able to scout and survey properly. And yes, Tenya did play the role of a villain pretty good, but other than that, Izuku and Ochako did a fantastic job analyzing the situation and actually utilizing their strengths and also just their abilities to their largest advantage. And everybody else nods and agrees, and Momo even chimes in with some couple things that maybe she saw. But overall, everybody is in agreement that Bakugo was just outclassed and did some stupid stuff, and he shouldn't have taken on Izuku by himself one-on-one for no good reason. And as a villain, you want to keep your advantages, or at least trying to maintain your advantages to a large degree. Now, this would lead us to just watching the rest of the matches, or watching the rest of the hero versus villain 2 versus 2s, and Izuku watches as many of the heroes or up-and-coming heroes or classmates have some good things going on. I mean, frankly, some of them do really well, and others don't do not as well, or not as good. Some, like Todoroki, do extremely well, but then some, like Hagakure, who you would think would do pretty well in this scenario, doesn't do so well because of, well, Todoroki, and also the fact that, yes, her stealth is extremely helpful, but when you have someone that has so much area of effect, like Todoroki does with his ice quirk, yeah, you're dealing with a bit of an issue, and that might be an understatement, you could even say. But after everyone is done with their heroes and villains training, we go on to do the normal school-like stuff. I mean, we do the normal, classes and things of that sort, and eventually they actually go on a bit of a trip. This trip isn't too far away because UA High School on campus actually has a rescue facility, but that's where they're going to go next. And that's what Aizawa actually tells everybody as well, telling them all to hop on the bus, and they're going to be heading over there now. And while on that bus, everyone talks about one specific thing, and that's who has the strongest quirk. Everybody questions, do you think it's Bakugo? Do you think it's Todoroki? Do you think it's Deku? Now, everybody does conversate about this, and yes, Bakugo is a little bit out of the running because he got, beat pretty bad by Deku. But at the same time, I mean, he didn't even really get a chance to use his quirk during that fight. He was just kind of outskilled, and nobody really knows what Deku's quirk is. And some of them believe that Todoroki's is just so much better than everyone else's, and some others as well believe that actually Deku does have the best quirk. Just because you know how to use your quirk properly doesn't mean that your quirk is somehow weaker than others. He obviously can make the most of his quirk, making him extremely powerful. Now, this conversation continues on all the way up until they go to the rescue or the USJ, and the USJ, as they enter, they would be greeted by Pro Hero 13. Pro Hero 13 is a pretty cool hero overall, actually someone in the class by the name of Ochako Uraraka, who we've seen earlier, fangirls over her briefly, saying that she is kind of her favorite hero, and Pro Hero 13 has a black hole-like quirk, and she begins to explain to everybody that they're going to be doing rescue training today, and it's going to teach them a lot about not only their quirks, but a lot about hero work in general. Because hero work is so much more than just beating up on some bad guys. And as they walk in and continue talking about this specifically, portals begin to open and bad guys begin to approach and come out of those portals by a nearby fountain. And a couple people, even one by the name of Kirishima, says that must have cost a fortune to have actual fake villains come out so that they can train. And Pro Hero 13 immediately says that those are not fake villains, and Aizawa tells them all to get back immediately. Making sure that everyone is safe, he would jump forward and begin his assault on the villains. Izuku begins to slightly consider what's going on. I mean, he looks around seeing all of the villains, seeing this villain with a hand on his face and another one that is a giant being, and he can tell that these villains, those right there, are extremely strong. And he doesn't know what part of him is telling him to go, but there's a part of him telling him to actually go down there and fight with Aizawa. And it's a part of him that isn't the one that is heroic, isn't the one that is telling him, oh, you have to save people, you have to help people. No, this one is an urge for combat, an urge to test strength. Because once Izuku hears and sees that these are real villains, he immediately thinks to himself that he is strong enough, and has the ability to take them down. He jumps into action almost immediately, and his contemplation was only a matter of seconds. He dives in, immediately defeating multiple villains right next to Aizawa, and Aizawa can tell that the kid can fend for himself. And, well, I've said it before, but that is an understatement. This guy is absolutely beating the brakes off of most of the villains that are there, taking a lot of them out and thinning the horde of villains way before a lot of them could even split up. And frankly enough, there's really no chance for a ton of the other villains to spread out and sabotage the other kids. Actually, Kurogiri sees Izuku as such a big threat that he tries to send him off into a different direction, but Izuku's speed makes up for it, and he's able to dodge the portals that are going to consume him, and he's able to recognize how Kurogiri's quirk at least works to a certain degree. But he knows that the main targets and the strongest beings there are the Nomu, Shigaraki, who obviously he doesn't know his name, but he does know that he's powerful, and the person that's currently utilizing portals by the name of Kurogiri. Now, he knows they're the strongest, but he has to thin the herd of more or less villains that are there so that Aizawa can handle the rest relatively quickly. And it doesn't take too long to do so, but it seems like the villains realize that this kid is a threat as well, quicker than you could imagine, because the Nomu comes rumbling and stumbling, speeding right for Izuku, trying to actually land a punch on him. And he does just that. The Nomu lands a right hand on Izuku, but he's able to get his arms up to block, and Izuku can feel his bones not shattering, but vibrating from the punch alone. He knows his durability's good, but that type of punch is beyond anything he's ever taken. His arms are even sore, and he can feel that it seems as if the punch didn't even come off completely clean, and if it did, it might have shattered every bone in his arms by blocking it if he took the full brunt of the attack. And he immediately would look back up to see the Nomu is already on him right after already striking him that one time, realizing that this thing is not gonna stop until he's dead. So Izuku fights back and immediately would begin to try and get the upper hand on this Nomu by dodging, weaving, and also just punching him in any spot that he thinks could be a weakness or a weak spot in general. But quickly he would realize that he's going to need just full-on strength of blows to make sure that this Nomu can drop to the ground or even be substantially injured, because there is no weakness on the Nomu necessarily. I mean, he even punches at its brain, but it seems like the brain itself doesn't really even matter either. It might sound weird, but it kind of seems as if the brain on the Nomu is like kind of just, well, in a way, dead, as if it's just a acting mind control type of device, and it's already kind of corrupted to the point that it's not like it's a massive point in the functionality of the Nomu to a large degree. Now, he is able to do damage to it, and it might slow down the reflexes just slightly, or, you know, make it a little bit weaker, but he's not trying to kill the thing necessarily. He knows that he shouldn't be trying to kill really anything, and that includes monstrous beings, but he knows that he also has to fight for his life to survive, so he does his best to do so. Keeping the Nomu off of Aizawa and taking on the Nomu head on is not an easy task, but a task that really only Izuku, especially out of all the kids and all the students, would only be able to take on. Izuku is the one, and it seems like everybody is quickly realizing it, because the Nomu is just going blow for blow with Izuku, and you can feel the shockwaves throughout the entirety of the USJ. Now, everything would begin to shift, especially when All Might arrives. With his giant loud "I am here," he would come spiraling in with a punch of his own. Immediately after that punch, Izuku would follow up with multiple kicks and then a punch to the face of the Nomu. Now, when Izuku and All Might begin fighting, it seems like they're extremely coordinated. And when I mean coordinated, I mean coordinated. They're pretty damn good together, and it seems like they understand the fight style that they're both trying to work at, and it might be a kind of aftermath of the practice and also training that both of them went through together. And defeating the Nomu, like, more and more just seems like an easier and easier task as they go along. And Izuku and, well, All Might continue to beat on the Nomu, but the resistances are showing massively. This leads to All Might pointing toward Izuku and pointing toward Shigaraki, believing that Shigaraki is the main reason why this thing is literally doing the things he's doing. So he immediately would try to look for an opening to dash at the freak of nature that has a hand on his face and cracking skin. As he goes to punch the Nomu, he would immediately kind of miss on purpose as he lunges straight towards Shigaraki. Shigaraki doesn't even realize this, at least not in time, and as Aizawa cancels his quirk, just in case, not 100% knowing what his quirk is capable of, he would then land a clean blow to Shigaraki's face, knocking him out cold. And immediately Kurogiri tries to get him out, but it seems like Bakugo is already on the body of Kurogiri, shooting an explosion directly at it, refusing to let it go and let him leave. And since Shigaraki is basically out cold and out of commission entirely at this moment, the Nomu would just stop functioning properly. The fight would go on for a little bit of an aftermath, but with no other instructions and nothing else going on, especially when All Might sends him kind of out of the radius of Shigaraki, the Nomu has no idea what's going on and is kind of just flat out dormant. And this would kind of freak Kurogiri out, especially because he's trying to save Shigaraki here, and Kurogiri would do his best and would eventually get Shigaraki out, but would have to leave the Nomu behind. But there is one thing that really does bother the heroes, and that's the two people that are the main perpetrators, being that of Kurogiri and Shigaraki, are now gone through the portals, and there was really no way of stopping it. But it's obvious that Shigaraki has a lot to do, because it seems as if Deku has a massive leg up on him, especially with that blow. But it seems as if Shigaraki, now with the information of Deku and also the information of his coordination with All Might, it seems that they found, or at least they think they found, the successor of All Might, being that of Izuku Midoriya. Information that will go very well, at least leading to information going to the big boss, but that we know as All for One. But the good thing is, everybody currently in the USJ is safe. Nobody's hurt massively. I mean, mental scars are another thing, but nobody is necessarily hurt. There's no like crucial or brutal injuries, and everybody for the most part is okay, and that's extremely good. But Izuku does get in a bit of trouble. I mean, he was told to stay back, and he was told not to do anything too stupid, and he decided that he was going to dive straight into the feat of battle and make sure that he took down some villains. And as much as it did help, he is still a student, and he shouldn't have done that, and they have to worry about his safety more than anything. Now, Izuku does accept that and says that he apologizes and so on, but even Aizawa says that he's going to have to do some extra training, and he's going to do extra training with him as a punishment. Izuku kind of says, okay, I agree that I'll do the extra training, but even Izuku doesn't really see this as necessarily a punishment, but he has a feeling that Aizawa probably has some extremely brutal things for him to do, which he would be correct. And soon during this time, he would begin training with Aizawa, and Aizawa basically tells him that he has to do this brutal training routine before he actually learns something he wants to teach him. He throws him a scarf and tells him that since he's a hand-to-hand combat type of person and hand-to-hand combat type of hero, he's going to benefit from the usage of his mind and that scarf. He tells him that it's going to be something extremely hard to get a grasp on, but once he does, he's going to be able to utilize that in massive and insane insanely good ways, even better than some of Aizawa. He even tells Izuku that he'll be able to more or less get a different support version of it that is more durable, maybe one that is more, you could say, kind of brutal in terms of just as a weaponry standpoint, and maybe even one that he can control and utilize his weapons on as well, at least to some degree. He tells him that the scarf itself is durable, but he knows that he is a very strong person, so he probably will tear up the scarf somehow, even though it's like almost as strong as metal sometimes. But still, just in case, they'll get him something that is extremely durable as a scarf, and he'll utilize it even better than Aizawa when they're at the end of it. And this training continues on throughout this time, all the way up until the UA Sports Festival, and Aizawa makes sure that this is brutal training. So much so that when the UA Sports Festival arrives, Izuku is like completely exhausted. And when I mean completely exhausted, I mean completely exhausted. So it's going to restrict him in the UA Sports Festival pretty massively. But he is the #1 student, so sometimes you have to jump over some hurdles. And sometimes you gotta, try extremely hard and, prove why you are truly the greatest student that has ever entered UA, even better than All Might. And this is how he's going to do it at a disadvantage. But you're going to have to find out what happens at the UA Sports Festival in the next part of What If Deku had Toji's Heavenly Restriction. And if you enjoyed, show some love. Leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. And if you show a ton of love, I'll try to get the next video out to y'all ASAP, either tomorrow, which, technically this video, the day after this video comes out, or at least the next day. I've been trying to be a little bit consistent. I know some of y'all really wanted this type of content to come back, so that's why I'm here bringing it back. So if you love it and you enjoy it, please show some love, show support, and I'll continue to do it. With that said, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.